In this video, we strive to remain spoiler-free, discussing only story and plot elements from the books relevant to what has occurred already on the show. When necessary, a spoiler warning with a countdown will be given.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca.
I'm Max.
And I'm the Geeky Hippie. Welcome back to What the Adaptation, the YouTube show where we discuss adaptations from one form to another. This week, we continue with The Witcher, Season 1, Episode 5. What's the episode's title? Thirsty Appetite? Or Bottled Appetites.
Bottled Appetites.
Bottled Appetites, that's right. And
also
that's
thirsty.
Yes, very thirsty. This episode is based on the short story by Andrzej Sapkowski entitled The Last Wish, from the book The Last Wish. What did everybody think of this episode?
Overall, I like this episode quite a bit. I remember, when I first watched the season, I would say that, the last episode, episode 4 and episode 5, those were episodes that kind of elevated up a little bit in my book. And I enjoyed it this time around as well.
Xmas?
If anything, they definitely catered to the male gaze this episode.
Yes. Well, I have things to say about that too. Anyway.
I liked it a lot. A lot of reasons to like it. I have some complaints, and they might be surprising complaints where I want to complain, but changes I didn't like.
Yeah.
But they might be a little surprising where I go with that.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing about that. So let's get into the changes. So, Glenn, why don't you start and tell us about some of the changes that you start however you wish. Tell us something you liked first.
Some of the things I liked, I liked how they got rid of the whole, a bunch of extra scenes. They cut down scenes. What I really like they got rid of is all the stuff with that priest, whatever his name. That whole sequence after the guard burst, in the book, that's a lot longer. And everything from there just kind of, everything dealing with him, it was just, that was well gotten rid of.
Yeah, and the story, they kept kind of cutting away from Geralt and Yennefer and giving us some exposition. And it was just, I'm glad they did that too.
Yeah, can't argue with that.
Yeah. Especially just, you got to cut some things out for time. And, there was some extraneous stuff in there for sure.
Yeah. Of course, I think the show added some extraneous stuff. I wasn't happy with the way it opened with, at least so far as Geralt and Dandilion, Jaskier.
Yeah.
I'm going to continue calling him Dandilion half the time, because that's what the book says. But I didn't like the introduction of those two this episode, where it starts off and he's trudging, he's dredging the lake for this bottle, and Jaskier, Dandilion's walking up, and it's been months, years since they've seen each other, and they just happen to be in the same area. And then the bard happens to hear that Geralt's here, so would he go looking for Geralt, or did he just happen to be out in the woods wandering and run into Geralt? It seemed so awkward. It seemed contrived and awkward the first time I watched it, before having read the book. And I think they could have done better just keeping them having been traveling together and together fishing. Maybe not do the whole fishing sequence like you have in the book, where it's a foot long, a yard long catfish. I mean, that catfish described in the book was pretty big.
Yeah, they didn't need that. That
would have been just too much work to do on screen, But the way they went, I think, was just, it didn't work there for me. It really didn't work for me.
It's a little awkward, and then the way he's oh, let's talk about that law of surprise that we had in the last episode, and it's been 10 years or what, I don't even know how long it's supposed to be.
If anything, the part where he was like, I knew there was a bottle in here, kind of just seemed contrived. It was like, how did you know it was there?
Yeah, and if other people knew that, if he knew it was there, you would assume that he learned that from other people, and if other people knew, don't you think people would have been dredging that lake like crazy?
And if I remember right in the book, it was like they were just hungry fishing, and then they just happened to find the bottle, right?
Yeah, it was an
Yeah.
accident.
Luck of the draw.
So I don't know how I feel about that change. Like, because right in the book, it's by accident that they find it, but like Dandelion immediately knows who it is. I mean, what it is that he's found, and Geralt is skeptical. He's like, "That's not a djinn. It's not a genie." And like throughout most of the story, he's maintaining that it's not. And instead, they have Geralt specifically looking for it in the show. So that was interesting. Like, on the one hand, it kind of cuts to the point more quickly. Like, okay, we know this is what we're looking for. We know it's what it is. Like, we're not messing around with, oh, it's not a genie, not a djinn. And I think they might have done it in part because it helps explain like why Geralt feels responsible for what happens to Jaskier, because he was the one looking for it. He was the one messing around with this thing. Whereas in the story, I mean, Geralt feels responsible, but like it's not really clear why. Like that's all Dandelion who is messing around with it and making wishes, and so I don't know. Like I appreciate that in one sense, but I agree about the whole, oh, I just happened to find you on this stream and it's been 10 years. That is kind of silly. Yeah.
Well, what you point out actually goes to, it's a pickle of their own making, because if they didn't have Geralt on the show be so unfriendly compared to Geralt in the book, especially in the relationship with Dandelion,
right? Because
in the books, at this point, he would do anything for Dandelion,
right?
And it's even mentioned, there, and it's even discussed in the short story that he would do anything for Dandelion. So they're the ones who chose to make them not best pals.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and I'm not really sure why they're sticking with that at this point. Like, if like you said, if they'd chosen, they could have like shown an evolution in the relationship over the period of time, rather than, hey, I haven't seen you in 10 years. It's like, no, we've been buddies for 10 years. Maybe before we weren't that close, but now we are. They could have chosen to show that instead in the passage of time, and that might have been better.
And taking the bottle being found by accident out of the equation cuts into the whole aspect of destiny here. Because, them finding that bottle in the book sure seems like destiny, especially when Geralt and Yennefer are supposed to meet. And this was the catalyst for their meeting. So there's Geralt and Yennefer do have a destiny that comes even before what we'll discuss later on, what a lot of people think the wish was. That's a topic I want to discuss later. Finding the bottle by accident, that just smacks of destiny right there. And that fits in a story all about destiny, That's half the story here. So,
and then what was the other thing I was going to say? I had a thought while you were talking and now I forgot it. So Max, if you have something you want to say, go for it.
I'm good.
The other thing that I had an issue with, and this is the one that might surprise people, I think the orgy scene was gratuitous and unneeded, and even though it was pretty to look at, it was just, there was no need for it. I think the introduction in the book is much better, where he goes up to the room, even if we see her naked then immediately before the bath. So what? Hey, you know what? It's cheaper than hiring a room full of extras to grind and dance naked. I'm just like, that was not an expense. That was an expensive scene to shoot.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. But
sometimes there might be people who do that for free, so you never know.
Yeah.
True. But it does give a whole new meaning to the word ragamuffin now. That being the safe word to stop the enchantment.
Yeah.
Better than kumquat.
Yes. It is probably better than that. Well, I don't know. Depends how you look at it. That was my least favorite scene in the episode. And yeah, I kind of feel like it was superfluous, like gratuitous for shock or nudity or whatever that they were going for there. I mean, on the one hand, I get that they're playing up, this aspect of Yennefer in this episode, that she wants everything. And I think that is my guess is if you ask someone why that scene is there, that's why it's there, to sort of as another way of showing that from her in this episode. I still think it's gratuitous because I think they showed that anyway in other scenes in the episode.
Yeah.
And that wasn't necessary in order to communicate that. And so I think it was more for just, hey, let's have this really kind of epic scene when Geralt and Yennefer meet, and let's get some nudity in there because, apparently people like to have that in fantasy shows. And I don't actually, there's other nudity in this episode that I don't have any problem with at all. So it's not like I think nudity shouldn't be in there, but I do think that was gratuitous. The other thing about it is Yennefer in that scene what is she doing? Like, she is magically sort of compelling everyone to engage in this, and then she just lets them go. Like, how did all these people sign up for this? I mean, it raises a lot of questions where I'm just like, that was completely added. Like, I mean, Yennefer has all kinds of, interesting, potentially questionable things about her decisions, but that's kind of on another level, potentially enchanting a huge room full of people to engage in sexual acts that
It's a whole lot of compulsion. It's a whole lot of compulsion.
Clear how much consent is involved here, so that's potentially quite disturbing.
I was just remembering, wasn't that just after this scene with the guy and the lady that came to her with his ED problem?
Oh, it was a couple of scenes later.
And she said she had a solution for it.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking multiple people had an ED issue, and that was her solution.
Well, she clearly provided him with some kind of a remedy, But
you could see the tenting there.
And then as part of it, she's like, hey, join my orgy. I mean, it is possible that all these people there are like, fully there of their own free will. And the ragamuffin thing is just like, okay, when I say that, you get out of here because I'm done with you. Okay, like maybe that's all that is.
They all look pretty surprised at what was going on, though.
Yeah.
When she said that.
It raises a lot of questions. I don't.
It's not the only scene, though, that raises questions about, agency and, autonomy.
Yeah.
Well, we knew, even in the books, that she didn't really care about it, especially with Geralt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least at this point, she didn't care about it much.
Yep.
She's still pretty bitter, I think, about everything she's had to deal with. And I think she's justifiably bitter, but her actions here about, basically using compulsion on half a village, half the town to have an orgy, and using compulsion on Geralt later, the whole lilac and gooseberries thing.
Yeah.
Which Forsaken would she be right now?
Grendel.
Yeah.
Although, like I told Rebecca earlier this weekend, I think she would have been pretty dang good as either Lanfear or Berling. She might not be pale as a ghost like Lanfear, or overly buxomy as Berling, but she could pull off either. Just going by what she does with this show.
She's a good actress. She, you know, that's always the case. You know, the character may have some questionable moments. The actress is really, really good.
Definitely. And one other thing I disliked, I didn't like the fact that they kept him with the same name, but changed the trade ambassador, essentially, the guy who was filling the role of a trade ambassador from another country, into being the mayor of this town.
The mayor. Yeah, that was an interesting choice.
You know, I'm just like, yeah, I didn't quite like this. They could have changed his name if they were going to make him the mayor of the town.
Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't bother me. I mean, I guess I kind of understand it. Like, it's like a little bit easier to, it doesn't require any explanation the way that I guess in the story they had to explain a little bit of like, you know, who he was and, you know, why being with him gave her some protection in the town. Like, it's just, you know, probably some lines of dialogue would have been needed to explain that, which are kind of just easier to get when he's the mayor. So I don't know. That doesn't bother me.
And he was the one person at the house that night before Geralt got there that I don't think she had to use compulsion on.
Right. Probably not.
I think he was more than happy.
Yeah, he seemed like he was willing participant. Yeah. But also a real jerk. So there's that.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. Max, other changes that you want to bring up, either things you liked or didn't like in this episode?
Can't really say I liked or disliked, but there was that whole part with the dryads and Mousesack, which wasn't Mousesack.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
I don't like any of that story there.
A video ago, I mentioned, like, you know, I thought it might have been Mousesack in the thing with Ciri, but it was a different guy entirely.
Okay.
And they kind of replaced him and with Mousesack in this episode.
Yeah.
Because there was that guy that was part of her mother's military or whatever, that kind of like was with her, and they both kind of left.
Well, he died on the way out of town.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're thinking the guy, unless Max is think the guy who was in last week, who Frexonet.
No, I'm talking about I was talking about the guy in the book who was being forced to mate with the dryads.
Yeah, Frexonet.
Okay,
he's not. He's not from Central.
Okay, well, I had mistaken. Because I watched the movie for the show first, I thought that guy in the books was Mousesack. So so that the memory kind of like merged the two together. Then when I watched the book, I was like, it wasn't Mousesack, but in the show, it's Mousesack.
Yeah,
that's
what Frexonet was an officer for the kingdom that Ciri was supposed to go to get married. At least I believe that's where he was from, you know, because it was tied to her being transported to that kingdom to go get married to whoever she was connected. He was connected to that royal court, I believe. But yeah, I tried to black until you mentioned it. I kind of blacked out the whole Brokilon Forest Ciri thing and the Mousesack, because I really don't like what they did. They did Mousesack dirty.
Well, it was just, the whole thing was very interesting. Like, you know, to do, what do they call it? A Doppler? Doppler.
Short for doppelganger.
Right. But so, I mean, because that as a concept exists in other stories, but it was not used at all in that way.
Yep.
And I mean, so on the one hand, like, I remember, you know, for Ciri's part of the story, you know, first time through watching this, not having read it, I didn't enjoy Ciri's story as much because I wasn't really clear on where it was going. And it just, some of it seemed like we're kind of like she's spinning her wheels a little bit until, you know, we could connect her with Geralt, which we kind of knew was coming, but like, you know, it's just in the meantime, let's give her some things to do. Now, having read it, I mean, I understand some of what they are doing here with the dryads. Like that is part of her story, and they made some changes to that, which I don't mind. You know, in the sense, like, I don't know. I don't know that it would have made sense to try to get into explaining what the dryads were doing with people in the story. Like, you know, it's more extreme the way that they were, you know, bringing people into their fold. And it was probably a lot to get into in the show. So that's kind of simplified, or some of that's just left out, and that's fine. And I think I understand it a little bit more. But that said, I mean, you know, I guess it still doesn't work great, because as someone who hadn't read it, I'm like, I don't really know what we're doing in this forest. Like, what are we doing here? And then the Mousesack part was interesting. Like, it adds tension to know that this sort of creepy thing is going on, and here's someone that Ciri has reason to trust, but we, the audience, know that she can't trust him. So there's some tension there. So I understand, like, all the reasons for that, I guess. But yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag, that whole part of the story for me.
Possible plot hole that would be like, I can't remember from the show, but did they explain how Mousesack found her there?
In the book? Or
in the show?
Oh, because he knew that they knew she was in Brokilon after last episode when Fringilla had her, you know, her sacrificial pawn wizard cut the arm and eat that flesh.
Was the beginning of this. Oh wait, was that last episode?
That was last episode.
Okay, I don't. For some reason, I thought that was the beginning of this episode.
This one opens with the Doppler in his attic.
Oh right.
And we do meet a Doppler later on in the series.
Yeah.
Because like I'm watching the episode, you know, a week later, like I totally forgot about that sacrifice thing. So like, how the hell did Mousesack find her?
Weird too. Like, that's how they figure out where she is. Like, that was bizarre. Anyway.
I don't like the way they're treating magic as done by the Nilfgaardians. Their magic, and you'll see it in later episodes this season, their magic is very self-sacrificial. You know, they don't go for the balance that Tisea talked about. They just go, oh, yep, drain yourself, kill yourself off, and, you know, we'll use your death. Yeah, I don't get that in there. That whole thing with the white flame that Fringilla mentioned, that's supposed to being the emperor of Nilfgaard. You know, that he's the white flame apparently, and that's not really. I think white flame might have been used once or twice in the entire book series, but and they're playing heavily into it with the show, both season 1 and 2, as if it's like this heavy thing on religion. It's like the only time religion really comes into play in any way in the show so far is, you know, Nilfgaard's treatment of the emperor as the white flame, like it's some sort of, you know, messiah figure.
Well, I will say at this point in the show, like, she mentions that, and I'm like, do we know what she's talking about? Because, like, you know, like, I don't think we really know what's going on there. So yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it was just sort of a weird scene. But I'm
not happy with anything that they're doing with Nilfgaard.
Yeah, I can't say that I am either. But and even like Fringilla is like seemingly an important character, but without having like any development whatsoever. So like, that's kind of just, I don't know. Like, anyway, she seems important in terms of like her role she plays, but I don't know who she is or like what's going on with her. So
the problems with Nilfgaard start with the armor and go way further than that.
Yeah.
Because I'm not happy. You probably don't even really know who Jaskier is yet. I don't know how far you've gotten in Blood of Elves or the regular books.
Oh yeah, no, I'm mostly finished with Blood of Elves.
Okay, Jeskier's the Nilfgaardian officer who hired the Doppler, but they're making him way different on the show, season 1 and season 2, from what he is in the books, and he's not. That's the other character that's being done dirty. What they're doing with Kay here. Jen and I talked about that last week.
I mean, it has
briefly.
to happen sometimes, but yeah.
It's just not happy with how they're handling him.
Yeah, so I feel like we've been kind of like, we don't really like any of these changes. I will say, I like the scene they added with Tisea in this episode. I did like that. And I think a scene like that is a lot more effective in terms of getting us inside Yennefer's head. While it's not flashy, it's not maybe showing us as much in the same way that an orgy is, but it's I think more effective.
There were some shortcut changes they made with the base story there with Geralt and Jaskier that I liked, but there were a bunch of changes I didn't like.
Yeah, I mean, and another thing I will add that it seems different to me is that, like, when you're reading this short story, by the end of it, I think you have a sense that Geralt is at that point already in love with Yennefer. And it's interesting because on the one hand, normally I'm not like, I don't really like, hey, we just met and I'm in love with you forever. Like, that is extreme. I think that we're not given a whole lot to go on in the story for that.
It does kind of happen in the book too, though.
No, I mean in the book. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like in the book,
love.
It's a leap, and we're not given much, to help explain how he gets there. And I will say, I suppose it's in some ways a good change that we're not expected to take that big of a leap in this episode. I don't think. Like, I don't get the sense that we're supposed to believe that he is that far gone in this episode by the end of it. Like, there's obviously something there.
Because she asks why, and he says, "Don't you know?" About why he did that wish.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. So maybe they do want us to make that leap, in which case they're definitely not really communicating that. So I don't know. They cut out some of it, even like the little bit that's there in the story where he sort of gets this glimpse into her past and her inner self, which helps explain that connection a little bit, right? Like that is probably the one thing in the story that helps explain it a little bit, and they didn't include that. So maybe they should have kept something like that in somehow.
Yeah.
Because if they want us to, buy into that, all I really see in this episode is just the sexual tension and chemistry, not seeing love. I mean, he cares for her. He does.
And you use that word,
but why?
Love is supposed to be something Witchers can't feel.
Yeah.
Going back to the first episode of the season.
Yeah.
Stragobor is it's said a lot in the books that Witchers don't have emotions. It's not just Stragobor, but it's pretty obvious with Geralt, at least, that Witchers do have feelings.
Yeah, I've just never bought into that at all. Like, that's something that people say, but is contradicted by everything we see from Geralt. So I just don't believe that.
Yeah. He did have that insta love at first sight with Yennefer in the book, as well as the short story or the show, that I don't quite buy. But after the love is established, I do buy the relationship between them in the books, at least.
Yeah.
Going forward on the show, we'll see.
Right.
So, just a random thought here is, like, there were several stories that were basically like Cinderella and various princess ones. Yeah. So which one are they as a couple?
I don't know. It's a good question.
I'm assuming it's not Beauty and the Beast, because we kind of had that one.
Well, which would be the beauty and which would be the beast? Because
they're both beautiful.
two of the most attractive people I've seen on television in a long time.
It's true. But TV does like to try and convince us that someone who is objectively gorgeous is not gorgeous, which they do try to pull that off all the time. So I don't know.
He's all that, as an example.
Yeah. So maybe they
Netflix's new He's All That.
Right. Maybe they think by giving Henry Cavill slightly odd hair and eyes that we're not gonna think he's sexy. Nice try.
He's also a mutant,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they say he's a mutant, so he can't be attacked.
Right.
But other than that, I can't think what fairy tale relationship those two would be based off, if any.
I don't know. Yeah.
And Beauty and the Beast is next season.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, there is no storytell.
Ciri's father could be Beauty and the Beast too.
Right. There's a little bit of that in the last episode. Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely a little bit of that last episode.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things in this episode, but yeah, overall, there are a lot of changes that are, I'm unsure about. Yet somehow I did enjoy the episode. There were things that I really liked about it. So it's kind of a weird mix. But overall, I didn't think that this was wildly different from the source material either. A lot, we're focusing on the changes, but overall, I would say it's kind of similar to it.
It is pretty similar. We'll get to that rating later.
Yes.
All
right.
Overall, I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah. Anything else we want to say about changes before we move on to another topic?
Can't think of anything.
All right. So I think we're ready to dive into best favorite scenes of the episode. Max, what do you got for us?
Trying to think of a decent good scene.
Oh, I feel like this episode is getting a little trashed in our conversation here.
But I don't think any of us disliked it.
No, that's the funny thing about it. All right, so
I'll go with the Jaskier being cut off from talking. And then that one picture I put in our Discord here, him just looking at Geralt with all people around him I can't use his voice.
Which, that is a nice thing when it comes to Buttercup. Not hearing him talk is nice sometimes.
When you have a person like Dandil I who has to talk and being unable to, and he wants a quip to get thrown out, but he can't, is torture.
Yeah.
It's literally hell for him.
Yeah, it is, because there have been times where I couldn't talk for one reason or another, and for me that doesn't work well.
I would hate that too.
It's like Thanksgiving dinner and you have an uncle that says something, you just really want to lay into them, but you don't want to be exiled from your family.
Yeah, definitely. So you're saying this episode you did like was Dandelion not being able to talk, or it being inflicted upon him?
The wish put on him.
The wish? Okay.
I mean, for me, I think I liked the bath scene. So, and I'm not just saying that because, there are pretty people on my screen without clothing. No, it's, I think it's a good example of sometimes, nudity makes sense and it's not there for no reason. And in fact, It's funny because in the story, they did away with Geralt being able to see Yennefer, right? She does this magic so that she's invisible to him. She wants to be able to see him, but doesn't want him to be able to see her. And then, they make a whole thing out of that. And I'm glad they didn't do that, because bet that would look kind of goofy on screen.
I disagree.
Oh, really?
I actually think it would have been more titillating, to use a word, to see that done. It would have been more expensive, but I actually would have enjoyed seeing the soap and the water, the way it was done in the book on her, than have seen her naked. To be
I don't
honest.
disagree that it would be more titillating. Like, I think that that's part of the point of it in the book, right? That he can't really see, but he can imagine, and he sees the outline of her, and
He
a
sees
lot of
this and
times,
that.
right, the imagination and not being able to quite see everything is more enticing. So I don't disagree with that, but I think it took the point of that scene actually a little bit away from that, right? Like, they're back to back, so they're not even really like looking at each other a lot of the time. We can see more than I guess they're really seeing for a lot of
Right.
it. And but the point of the scene wasn't really, oh, this person is hot. It's like more of the conversation. So I don't know, I thought it was a good scene, and I did not mind the changes. I think it works, and it's a scene where, like, we can kind of see that there is some point to the nudity, as opposed to the orgy scene, where I don't think so.
See, I don't even think the nudity in the trap and the genie scene was needed, but I'm not complaining about it.
That might not have been needed. I agree that probably that scene was probably not needed. But,
most of the nudity in the show for this episode, I think, was pointless. I would have rather have seen the nudity when and where the book shows it. Yeah. And then I would have totally been willing to sacrifice the orgy for, the soap and the water, and her still seeing his eyes, but him not seeing her at all.
They could have done a Game of Thrones style with the apple juice scene.
Yeah, they could have made that a sticky mess.
Yeah. But anyway, I don't know. I thought that was a good scene, and I don't mind the nudity there. But I agree that otherwise in the episode, the nudity is probably pretty gratuitous. But in that scene, I think I'm okay with it. Like, it works there for me. What was your favorite scene, or most memorable scene? Go ahead.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to probably. I might have to agree with you on the bath. I mean, because it was, even though I don't totally agree on their choice of when and where to use nudity, I do think the bath scene was really well done. I actually also really kind of like the non-orgy parts of the orgy scene, when Geralt and her first start talking to each other, their initial interactions are just, I really enjoyed, all the back and forth between Geralt and Yennefer, to be honest. All of it was just throughout the entire episode, even through to when the wish was being made, was just really well done.
Yeah. And I think that's overall probably why I enjoy the episode, is just getting to see that interaction between the two of them, because these two characters have been built up separately throughout the season, and it's their first meeting, and there's a lot of energy there in their interactions. So I think that's why this is an interesting episode. And again, it's where things start to come together, and that's why I think I enjoyed it. And similar, like with last episode, because last episode is where the connection between Ciri and Geralt is really coming together, and then in this one, it's finally Yennefer and Geralt meeting. So, least favorite scenes?
Probably, as much as I just said, I'd like the scene, the part of it between Geralt and Yennefer. At the same time, the least favorite scene is probably walking in and seeing the orgy going on.
Yeah.
And I mean, so the same scene is my favorite and also my least favorite, in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I have to agree. That's all.
Actually, no, I know my least favorite. It's everything with Mousesack in this the Mousesack in this episode.
Okay.
Yeah, I forgot all about the Mousesack and Ciri stuff, so I was thinking about that.
No, for me, it's the orgy scene, like, for all the reasons already mentioned. Like, yes, there are parts of it, like, where, you know, Yennefer is talking to Geralt that are interesting, but I'm not really counting that. I'm just saying like the part where she's having this random magical orgy. Yeah,
And
for all
just
the
sitting
reasons
there
already stated,
and
like,
sitting there fully dressed watching it.
so weird. Anyway, yeah, no. I don't, that's definitely my least favorite scene.
I can't disagree with that. That would be up there for me, to be between that, the fishing scene, which just kind of didn't quite work for me, and everything with Ciri.
Okay.
Yeah.
Her series kind of just felt like an afterthought for the episode, just to kind of catch everything up with her.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I
to
definitely
finish
felt
up-
like that on first
and to
watch.
finish-
I mean, it's a little better on second watch series parts, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
They had to wrap up The Last Destiny. Speaking of The Last Destiny, I've noticed is the Sword of Destiny mentioned in the games, Max? Do you remember?
I can't remember offhand.
Because there's a misquote in the show, and it's misquoted online. They're saying the Sword of Destiny on the show, and a lot of websites say the Sword of Destiny has two edges.
Yeah.
English translation that I've got specifically says the Sword of Destiny has two blades, not two edges.
Huh.
The audiobook, that's what Peter Kenny reads over and over, is the Sword of Destiny has two blades. But if you go to search on Google, you will find many, many, many websites referring to the way it's phrased on the show of Sword of Destiny has two edges. And I didn't know if that was something that maybe was a change that came about because of the video game.
No, because the game definitely hammers home on that he has two blades. He has a silver for what do you call them?
Monsters.
For monsters, and the steel for humans.
Yeah.
So
I
don't know on that side.
that steel has to kill.
Well, it's literally because he's either fighting humans or monsters.
Yeah.
And silver almost always works on monsters, and steel almost always works on humans or beasts.
Right.
Interesting.
But yeah, that was one thing I noticed earlier this week. I think it was Friday when I was watching it for like the 5th time. She said Sword of Destiny has two edges. I'm like, wait a second. And I went and I opened the book up. And I looked, yep. And then I tracked it down on the audio. Yep, Sword of Destiny has two blades. So Google has it wrong, and all the articles that were written about it are all writing about it from the show point of view.
There's a Witcher 3 trailer called the Sword of Destiny trailer. So at least they make a reference to it, but I don't know if there's anything in game. I can't recall offhand.
I have to check it out.
Does anyone have any like cast shout outs they want to make in this episode, either for good or bad? Someone that was a standout to you?
I did want to point out that I think Adam Levy, I think that's his name, who plays Mousesack, he did a really good job as the Doppler version of Mousesack. Just
Good
the
point.
quiet looks on his face when nobody else could see his face. You know, like she's giving him the hug and he rolls his eyes in this weird way. And as they turn around and they're walking out, his face goes from being all, you know, happy about having her with him to all of a sudden just really sinister. And just that shift of his face just was, ooh, that's well done.
No, that's true, because he's playing basically two different characters in the same episode. So yeah, it's a good shout out.
And then of course Anya Chalotra.
Always, yeah. She always, I mean, she really
owns
herself
this show.
into it this episode.
I'll have to give a shout out to Dandelion for his unable to talk and showing his, you know, inner hell of not being able to say anything.
Yeah, he was good in this episode. Yeah.
The makeup for that goiter on his neck was kind of nice looking too.
The other Doppler guy was creepy too. I just had to sort of point that out. Like the very first introduction of him, like
the guy who enjoyed the way he looks way too much.
Yeah, that was creepy.
Yeah.
It was a little Sounds of the Lambs there.
Oh, it
Buffalo
was.
Bill.
Yeah.
It definitely was, but yeah, still creepy.
Without the tuck and dance. Everybody's
So many
like,
problems with
wait
that,
a
but we
second.
won't get into that. Okay.
And I didn't have any actor that disappointed heavily at all.
No, nothing that's in a standout kind of way, right? Like,
No.
yeah.
The other guy that was peeking in with Dandelion on Geralt.
Yeah.
Yeah, he gets a negative for his peeking in on Geralt. Pervy like.
That whole character was like both in the show and in the book was just interesting. Like, I'm not really sure why actually we have this character and why they kept it, of an elf who is randomly in love with Yennefer, why? I don't really know why.
I think partially the initial reason he put it in the short story was probably to show a couple of elves that have integrated into human society.
Sure, yeah.
But I think that's why he was initially put in there. And that was also pointed out by the other person that was met in the Barbican, the one who had the coat of arms, the knight. He's a bastard, but also a half elf. And so,
that's in
all three
the story, but
in the story, yeah,
that wasn't in the show, right?
No, it wasn't in the show. They only had the one elf in the show. In the book, it was 2 elves and a half elf,
right?
Or a quarter elf. We don't know. We just know he was part human, part non-human, and assuming elf. But I think that's why he put those characters in the short story, was part of his whole thing about, showing the way elves are treated, and contrasting that, contrasting how elves are treated from the way humans are treated. Well, non-humans are treated from the way humans, treat each other.
That's fine. I wasn't really clear on the reason why that character was in love with Yennefer. Like, why was that an important addition? I just don't know, but whatever. It doesn't matter really.
Right.
Next question.
Yeah.
I said our next topic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, let's go on. So the next one is themes. So Glenn, why don't you start us off? Talk to us about the themes in this episode. How did they pull that in?
I've been thinking about how to talk about this one, because I think the big theme that I'm picking up on is the whole idea of agency. And this show makes it even worse than even more so than the books. And this is one of the things that, people would have reason to have against the character of Yennefer. She's not too nice most of the time, at least not early on. And she likes to mind track people. I don't want to use the other word, but, she seems to enjoy making people do what she wants, whether they want to do it or not. And as someone who had no agency early on in her life, she seems to be taking agency away from others left and right.
Yeah.
In her 80s. She's 83 at this point, by the way. I did the math, looked up birth dates. Yeah, she's 83. Looks pretty damn good for 83.
Yeah.
And then that comes into play with, the idea of agency as a concept comes into play with Ciri's story too, because she's the one who, Aithne leaves it up to Ciri whether or not Ciri's going to go.
Yeah.
With Mousesack. Beyond that, and the topic of what that last wish was, it's something I want to see what everybody's thoughts were after we just, but yeah, that's all I can see.
Yeah, the agency one is a good, I can see that as sort of there's some of that running throughout the different aspects of it. And some of that they didn't bring in, like, again, I brought up before about how they didn't really explore as much of what was happening with the dryads, like what happens to the people who decide, yeah, I'm going to become, or well, they're not even deciding, right? Like, there's no choice in some of these cases. So that was an aspect where they could have explored more about agency there that they actually didn't, or at least, I don't know, they went about it in a different way. So, and I think
they did.
Question is important overall when it comes to destiny as well, because this is something that comes up in the books a lot, that it isn't enough to have destiny. It's like there's always, maybe that again comes back to the two blades, or the however they want to say it, but the object of destiny has to choose it. It was an interesting way of like exploring, and that's important too. Like we saw that it wasn't really explained that much in the last episode, but like Pavetta having to choose her destiny as well,
right?
Like that was important. So yeah, I mean, I feel like agency was in this episode, or lack of agency more so, but I don't think it was as well explored or defined as it could have been. Perhaps there might have been some more opportunities to do that they didn't take. And I do also, like you said, find it very interesting / concerning how much Yennefer is a character who had no agency, started off with no agency, and her reaction to that is so extreme that part of it is her saying, as she does multiple times, she wants everything. So she, that's an interesting idea, and like it's sort of the opposite of that, having no agency, no control. She wants everything. She wants complete control. But at the same time, part of that is taking control and agency away from other people in order to have that, right? If you're going to have everything, then other people will almost by necessity then not have agency around you. And so she's taking it to an extreme.
Yeah.
Too far.
Definitely would not call her good aligned at this point.
Yeah, I think you both basically covered, destiny agency on this. Obviously, Ciri they name dropped destiny 2 or 3 times, and then just kind of moved on.
Yeah.
Earlier, Glenn mentioned destiny with Yennefer and Geralt with a wish, tying them together.
Yeah. And that was more discussed in the story. Like there's a little conversation between Yennefer and Geralt, and we still don't have the exact wording of the wish of what he said, but they talk about it, and she talks about how he's tied himself to her. And so there's a bit more of it in the story of our understanding of how that wish might come in. And that gives us more of a clue also as to what the wish might be, compared to in the show. There's less to go on as to what the wish might be.
Yeah. There's a lot less in the show than there is in the book.
Speaking of agency, I would say that part of it isn't so much that they have it, but that they're like lose access to it, or they're making other people lose access to their own agency.
Right.
I just finished season 2 of The Witcher, and without getting any spoilers in there, some themes in there is about agency and allowing a character to have it, especially when it comes to destiny.
Yeah.
Like the lack of agency like Geralt has with Yennefer mind charming him, or her taking away people's agency in the orgy scene, they're giving a certain character option to have agency, even though Geralt will take that agency away.
Okay. I do know that when it comes to the wish, there are a lot of differing ideas out there.
Okay.
But I will include in the description, and I'll probably even put it on screen when I edit this, a link to one of the better articles I found detailing what the last wish could have been and what it could not have been. based on what Sapkowski has talked about. He flat out has said that it's not, I wish she falls in love with me. You know, which is one of the first things I saw people online ever saying that the last wish was, as in for the book, you know. There's even a couple of reviewers on YouTube who think that part of the reason that they did not like the Last Wish book was because Geralt, quote, wished for Yennefer to fall in love with him, and that's very clearly not at all what he wished for.
I never thought it was that. You know, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But, you know, but there is, you know, certainly, again, that discussion they have where, you know, she talks about him sort of tying himself to her through this wish. But I didn't, you know, the way she reacts to in the story, I mean, I just don't see her reacting the way that she did. She was surprised by the wish and maybe touched by it in a way, but like I don't think she would react that way if it was, oh, I want this woman to fall in love with me. Like,
yeah,
I just
and
that's not even Geralt's style either.
No, it's not.
Did you want to discuss what we thought the wish was, or wait?
Yeah, let's discuss the wish. Max, what did you think the wish was?
I figured it was just he wished that they would die together.
That's pretty much
interesting.
That's the most common, the most logical answer I've seen, and I would agree that I would more say that so much that their fates were entwined and that they would die together.
It also works with the video game.
Yeah,
because in the video game, and I don't know if this is book spoilers or not, they get killed by the Wild Hunt, I believe, or he thought it was Wild Hunt, but it was some villagers or something. But they weren't actually dead, but they were dead.
Okay.
Both of them, and there's like he got like a pitchfork through him or something. There was some tree involved. I can't remember exactly how it all happened, but they didn't die, but he lost his memory. They both did.
So it could be something like, don't let her die without me, you know, or some, I don't know.
It's like together, because if they don't die together, then the genie can't kill him or kill her without killing him. And because it's not allowed to kill its master and they have to die together, it can't kill her without killing him.
Yeah.
So really, that last wish,
that far with it, but I did. It's just the gist of what I thought it was that, you know, his wish was to protect her, basically, to you know, for her. I don't know exactly what form that would take, but that the intent or the purpose behind it was that she not die in that moment.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the thing with Ciri is like he just kind of said it, and like, oh shit, what'd I do?
Mm-hmm. Or like when he says, I wish for you to, what's the word he uses? And then
I wish for you to burst.
Burst. That's what it is.
Burst. Yeah. Ugh. That was just like, whoa.
Oops.
Yeah, the whole idea with the idea of him wishing for their fates to be bound, it does tie into that where the genie cannot kill its master. And because of that, because if he did wish for their fates to be entwined or to die together, that last wish is still unresolved, which means that genie's not free. That genie's still floating around waiting to fulfill that wish. Because
if you go by the games, it did complete that wish.
Yeah, because at this point they're still both alive, so that wish hasn't been fulfilled. And it's just like, yeah, that genie's not a happy genie right now.
Yeah, but again, we don't know if that was the wording of it. Like it could have, you know.
And he refuses to answer. Sapkowski refuses to answer what the wish was.
It's his Asmodin.
Yeah, there's a lot of. But I definitely buy the idea that he wished for their fates to be bound together.
Something like that. Yeah. Okay, so I think we should give our ratings for how close this episode was to the source material. And Max, do you want to begin?
I think you're because of the Ciri in the woods and the few minor changes in like the orgy scene, for instance. I'll just give it like a 6.
Oh.
So I was gonna go like 6.5 or 7. I'll probably say a 7 because it was still, I mean, the changes that were there for the most part aren't major. I mean, there's some shuffling around of stuff, some stuff being removed and stuff being added slightly, but the effect of the change is so small. The overall effect of the changes that were done, I think. Yeah, I'll go with a 7.
Okay.
For the
Yeah,
change.
I didn't actually, yeah, I kind of feel more like that, which is that, overall, like there are a lot of similarities, a lot of things stay the same. I mean, and a lot of the things that did change, I don't think were of much consequence. Now, there are a few that I think are consequential, but even some of those are more to do with like Ciri's story. And again, they needed to kind of expand on that because there's not as much to work with. So I don't look at that in the same way as I do other kinds of changes. So I mean, I would actually go with like a 7.5.
Okay. We got some divergence there, which is good.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's been the same numbers.
I know, yeah. But then how about, for enjoyment of the episode, Max?
Say when I first watched it a year or whatever ago, I think probably 7.5, maybe 8.
Yeah. And now?
Yeah, let's do the 7.5.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's kind of stay the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Glenn?
I'm gonna say an 8.5 on enjoyment. And that was before having read the story.
Yeah.
Even after reading the story, I'd still say an 8.5. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That'd be my overall.
Yeah.
Say 8.5.
I'd say, for me, I'm probably at like I would say originally I was probably maybe an 8.5. And, maybe I knock it down to like an 8, with factoring in having read it and some of the changes or just a second watch, honestly. In some cases it's not even just necessarily because it was changed, but just a second watch. It's weird though, because some things I enjoy a little bit more and some things a little bit less. So it's hard. It kind of balances out a little bit, but I say overall I'm at about an 8.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. Any final thoughts?
Don't have any myself.
All right.
Max, any for you?
No. For like averaging out the total scores, which I kind of screwed up on. For where I believe the show, or where I would like the show about before reading the books, after reading the books, and together, I just put it down to like a 7.375.
Okay.
Just to kind of mess up your averaging there.
Okay.
So 7 3/8. Yeah.
7 3/8.
Yep.
Very
7.375.
I don't do fractions. I do decimals on the screen.
Yeah. So 7.375.
7.375.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's extremely precise.
Exactly.
Yes. My Max is going
6 zeros
overboard.
later, there was a 1 just to really.
No, just to really mess it up. I see.
Yeah.
Oh, Max. Well, I guess we knocked out another episode of The Witcher Season 1. We will be coming back next week for episode 106, Rare Species, which is based on the short story The Bounds of Reason from the Sword of Destiny. And I would like to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and thank both of you for being on this wonderful show with me, this nice little adventure we're going on. And I look forward to everyone returning next week. Please leave us a like, a comment, or 2 comments, maybe even 3 comments, and subscribe. and hope to see everybody back next week. And don't forget to be awesome.